Thanks very much. I really do enjoy coming here, and I'm particularly proud that my wife Ann is able to join me today with my partner Wen Shea. So I'd like this session to be quite informal. I want it to be on topics that are of interest to you, and then there's a couple of interest to me that I'd like to share. So you've probably not seen this before. I hope that you have, but I want to begin by getting about a half dozen really important topics or questions from you up on the board. So if you put your hand in the air and identify yourself, tell me what's on your mind. What would you like to hear about, from venture capital to hot new technologies to public policy to hot stock tips, whatever you want to cover. So yes, name?
Peter.
Peter?
Your interest in education entrepreneurship?
Cool. Education entrepreneurship from Peter. And I can remember this scrawl. So next question. Yeah.
Do you think that the venture capital has the right stuff to go into Greentech? Is there the right knowledge with the people who are doing it, and the right capabilities?
Okay, are venture capitalists going to succeed in green? Or is this maybe the next March of the Lemmings? Question. Yeah, your name?
Online news media.
Pumet.
Online media.
Internet related. Okay, online news. Another one? Yes?
The role of medical technology in containing healthcare costs in the U.S.
Wow. Okay. In 30 words or less, right? Healthcare costs. Some more. Let's go. Yes.
There's been a lot written about criticizing the business model of venture capital and whether it's sustainable in the future.
Mm-hmm. So the future for venture capital, right? Nothing short of an industry analysis and prediction. Yes, ma'am.
Melissa, VCs and their moves overseas, specifically to developing nations.
Mm-hmm. Oh, developing nations, or would you consider India and China developing, or not?
So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. International VCs. How about two more? Yes.
My name's John.
Hi, John.
Is Google a one-trick pony?
That's a really good question, but you know what? I don't ever try to speak for the companies I'm invested in, so that one's off the board. Two more, yes.
Jeannie, backgrounds and other characteristics that you look for in promising upcoming
ventures? Absolutely, great question. I'm going to cover that. I'm glad to hear that. And one more.
Hi, Tanmay.
Hi,
your view on clean tech and particularly ethanol.
Clean tech, ethanol, going to cover that too. That's very good. So what I thought as a set piece we'd do is start with these questions and topics. I'll cover a number of them through some slightly organized remarks. And in those remarks, I want to tell you a little bit about, go ahead, you can take those down for now. I'd like to talk a little bit about venture capital and technology. I'm going to offer some unsolicited career advice, which is worth exactly what you're paying for it. And then I'd like to do a deep dive into an area of interest to me and my partners, which is the area of green technologies and innovation there. And then we can come back, I hope, for some more questions or topics. So we're going to start with Kleiner Perkins. Is that right, Wen? We are. Okay, very good. So we're then going to deep dive into a problem that I'm actually quite concerned about. And I want to tell you how I came to this concern. It was last summer sometime after. How many people have seen Al Gore's movie, The Inconvenient Truth? So, yeah. After having seen that movie, which moved me a lot, I had a conversation that had an even bigger impact on me. We were having dinner with some friends, and we went around the table to say, okay, what do you think of this global warming? Is it real or not? Is it man-made? And there was largely agreement there. We then came to my 15-year-old daughter, Mary, and I asked Mary, so what do you think about this? And she said, well, I want you to know the following. I'm scared and I'm angry. Your generation created this problem. She turned to me and then she said, you better fix it. And it changed my life. It really changed the commitment and passion that I have for this problem. And I submit to you that not only did I not know what to say, it really drove home the impact of what we're confronting. We cannot afford to underestimate this problem. I think we face really irreversible, catastrophic potential change, and I think we've got to act, and we've got to act very, very decisively. So I set out on a mission with my partners at Kleiner Perkins, with Wen and others, to do what we usually do. When we see a big opportunity or a big problem, we go network like crazy. We meet all the smart people that we possibly can, and we mobilized. Man, we hopped on airplanes. We went to Brazil to learn about ethanol. We went to Sacramento, to Washington, D.C. We were in China. We were in India. We were in Davos. And everywhere I turned, we learned more, and I grew more concerned. So I'd like to tell you 4 stories about what we've learned over the last year about that. And to set the context, really to understand where energy is coming from and where it's going, there's a wonderful chart provided by the government that shows the sources of energy. You notice on the left the sources and on the right the uses. And they're largely dirty fossil fuels, from oil, gas, and coal, with clean renewables up on the top, to the uses, residential, industrial, and automotive. And there's 3 big points to take away from this. The first is that less than 5% of our energy in the upper left-hand quadrant comes from clean renewables. The second, among the uses, shows that, you see, more than half of the energy, that gray bar, is wasted. It's in the form of waste heat. And the third is that if we want to reduce greenhouse gases, it boils down to 3 things: to cars, to coal, and conservation. That's the whole story. That's how we're going to attack this problem. We're going to need more efficient cars that don't burn oil. We're going to need to find ways to make coal cleaner, because we are going to burn it. And then we've got to work very hard and very fast on conservation. So I told you we're networkers. What we did at Kleiner is we put together something we call the Greentech Innovation Network. And it's about 50 policymakers, entrepreneurs, academics, business leaders. I mean, from Al Gore to Jay Kiesling over at UC Berkeley, who just got a $500 million grant from British Petroleum to do work there on biosynthesis. And they advised us. We tapped their brains and involved them in ways I'm just about to tell you. But the first place we went is we went to companies, because companies are really powerful, and companies matter a lot in this campaign. And so the story I want to tell you, with apologies to Diana Rothschild, who lived there and worked there, is a bit of a story about how Walmart went green and why. And it was just a couple of years ago that Lee Scott, the CEO, came to the view that green was going to be the next big thing, and he wanted Walmart to participate in that. So they made it a corporate priority and committed they would lower the energy consumption in their stores by 20%, and do so in less than 7 years, 30% for the new stores. And then they went to the stores and they said, the 3 largest uses of energy are heating, air conditioning, lighting, and refrigeration. So what did they do? They started painting all the roofs of their stores white, putting in them smart skylights that could harvest the daylight, coordinated with the interior lighting. And then they put their refrigerated goods, all of them behind closed doors with LED lighting. Now, pause there for just a moment. Think about it. Why would you have an open refrigerator and try and cool the whole store? Well, these other merchants aren't stupid. Maybe because people would buy more cheese and milk if it's right there and you can touch it. But Walmart, being data-driven, went out and tested that proposition. They found no change. People will buy the stuff behind closed doors as readily as before. The net of this is these are all simple solutions. We don't have to engineer new microbes to get this done. They're existing technology, and it matters enormously. Why? Well, because Walmart is massive. This is the largest private employer in America and the largest private user of vehicles. If it were a country, Walmart would be the 6th largest trading partner with China. Most important, I say, is when Walmart makes a move like this, as you'd say, go green to make money, it affects a lot of other companies who admire them enormously, General Electric, Federal Express, and so forth. But I think I told you at the start of this conversation that my daughter Mary was really scared. And one of the themes you'll hear from me is I'm quite scared about this problem also. I don't think, in fact, we're going to make it. Well, why not, you say, John, if Walmart's doing all these great things? Well, when Walmart achieves 20% energy reductions, which is fantastic, it is a very big deal. But frankly, it's not enough. We're going to need all the other companies to act if on average we're going to get a 20% greenhouse gas reduction. Let me turn from companies to individuals and tell another story about Walmart. Fact one about Walmart, they have 125 million customers. Fact number two, there were 65 million compact fluorescent light bulbs sold last year. And then the stunning fact number three is that Diana's colleagues at Walmart stepped up to the plate and said, we're going to sell 100 million more compact fluorescent light bulbs this year. Think of that, 125 million customers. That's practically every household in the United States. It's a third of the population. And 100 million compact fluorescent light bulbs? That's what they've signed up for. And it's not easy. The fact about these bulbs is consumers don't really like them. They cost a lot more in the beginning. Their color isn't quite right. It takes some time for them to turn on, and you can't dim them. So my message to us about consumers is, despite a very large payoff, like 100 million lamps means those customers will save $600 million a year, and they'll eliminate 20 million tons of CO2. Despite those great gains, which happen in just a year, it's really, really hard to change consumer behavior. Companies, consumers. Why is it so hard to change consumer behavior? I mean, we use 2 tons of steel, aluminum, and glass to haul our sorry carcasses to the shopping center in SUV. It's stupid that we do that. It's stupid that we take water, bottle it in Fiji, and then ship it here to the United States. It is stupid that we dump 70 million tons of CO2 into our atmosphere every day, like it's an open sewer. Are people that stupid? I don't think so. I think it's hard to change consumer behavior because we don't tell individuals how much the behavior costs and how much CO2 they're generating. Do you know? I mean, we care about this. Do you know how much CO2 you generated to come here today? I don't know. I drove here. And if I don't know, how can we expect other consumers to do this? Those of us who care would act better if we knew, or if the market told us. But as long as we pretend that this is free and the uses are nearly invisible, I don't know how we can expect change. And that's why, honestly, I'm really afraid that we're not going to get the consumer change that we need so that my daughter Mary's not going to be scared. Back to the lessons. Third lesson that Kleiner learned as we went to check out and understand this problem is that policy really matters. It really, really matters. It's paramount. And so I've got a story to tell you that's a behind-the-scenes story from this Greentech Innovation Network. Remember those 50 experts that we got together. At the end of our first summit, a software entrepreneur, Bob Epstein, who founded Sybase, stood up and said, you know, the single most important thing we can do about this problem is go to Sacramento and convince the legislators that a mandatory cap on greenhouse gas emissions is both good and good for business. And everybody rallied around that. We said, let's go. And sure enough, it was just a couple months later that a dozen entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley, largely business people and someone from Google.org, went there. And we met with 8 undecided legislators. And the Chamber of Commerce was saying at the time, you know, this is bad for business. It'll drive concrete production out of California. The extractive industries, big oil, they don't like this. And that was the only voice they heard until some other business executives came in there and said, you know, the story's not quite that simple. The business community is divided. And in fact, if you pass this legislation, it'll be good for the economy. And sure enough, what happened is a month later, the Assembly voted 47-32 to pass the first mandatory statewide greenhouse gas limits in the United States of America. And they did so because they believed it could create over 80,000 jobs in California and add $4 billion to the income of the state and remove almost 175 million tons of CO2 per year. Pretty impressive. Where California starts, the rest of the country can go. If the United States doesn't go, we're never going to get China and India on board. But as significant as that accomplishment was, you know, California is only 7% of the U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore only 1.5% of the world's CO2 emissions. And frankly, a 20% reduction on 1.5% is not going to be enough. Let's go from a state to a country. I mentioned to you we went Brazil. This is a story about national policy, right? Tom Friedman likes to say, if you don't go, you don't know. So sure enough, some of us hopped on an airplane and we flew to Brazil, to Sao Paulo, because we wanted to meet the godfather of the ethanol revolution, Dr. José Goldenberg. And we asked him, hey, how'd you do this thing in Brazil? And he said, John, it's really pretty simple. The government mandated that we'd have ethanol distribution at all of our gas stations, and we mandated that the new vehicles in Brazil would be flex fuel. That's able to run either on ethanol or gasoline. And so today, Brazil has 29,000 flex fuel pumps in the country compared to 700 in the United States and a paltry 2 in California. There was a piece in the Wall Street Journal this week, I think, talking about the obstacles for ethanol. And the other thing that they have is their new car fleet has gone from 4% flex fuel to 85%, and they've done that in 4 years. Contrast that to the United States, where only 5% of our new vehicles are flex fuel, and most of the owners of those don't even know it. So what's happening in Brazil is they've replaced 40% of their automotive gas consumption with ethanol, and they're almost energy independent with respect to oil. That means there's almost $60 billion they did not ship over to the Middle East. They used to create jobs in their country, and they've eliminated 32 million tons per year of CO2. It's really substantial. In fact, it's 10% savings across the whole country in Brazil. But it's not enough. Brazil is only 1.3% of the world's CO2 emissions. So even the Brazil ethanol miracle is not enough. And of course, we know to the problems with ethanol. You can't grow sugarcane all around the world. There's many issues with ethanol from corn. You know, the bottom line on this is there's no silver bullet. But Brazil has grabbed a great big bullet called biofuels. And my conclusion is, my fear is, I think even the best of all the policies we could put in place if we got them there could very well not be enough. The fourth and final lesson we learned is about the potential of really radical innovation. And I want to tell you about a tragic problem and then a really breakthrough technology. Around the globe, 1.5 million people die every year of malaria. That's a completely preventable disease. We can go to the corner drugstore and buy anti-malarial medication for a couple of dollars. And yet 1.5 million people are going to die because $2 is too expensive in Africa. So with a $15 million Gates grant, some scientists up at UC Berkeley are bioengineering the key ingredient in anti-malarial drugs. It's called artemisinin, to make it 10 times cheaper. And here's the thing that blew me away. They're on track, on budget to do that. If they succeed, they're going to save 1 million lives a year. Think about it, 1 million lives out of some technical work. Their breakthrough's called synthetic biology. Richard Newton, the dean of the engineering school there, who died of prostate cancer a few months ago, a good friend, grabbed me by the collar and he said, "John, synthetic biology is the next big, new, important platform. It's bigger than the internet." I thought, wow, I better learn more about this. But what he said, what we do is we leverage millions of years of existing evolution in microbes, and we redesign those bugs to make them useful factories. And so they actually custom tailor the metabolic pathways, and you end up with these chemical factories. What does all this have to do with green? Well, there's now a company founded by those folks working on malaria called Amyris, and their technology is being used for more than cheaper drugs. They think you can make better biofuels, which is a really big deal because it says that what you can do in the fuel is actually engineer every molecule in the chain that makes up a fuel and optimize it. So, as I was telling Ann the other night, if all goes well, we're going to have designer bugs that are swimming around in warm vats, eating and digesting sugar and excreting better biofuels. Or, as she said, well, John, that'll be better living through bugs. Alan Kay, who was at Xerox PARC while he was there, he's famous for saying the best way to predict the future is to invent it. Over at Kleiner, we say the second best way is to fund it. And so, so we're investing, and we've decided to do this just over the last year, $200 million out of a $600 million fund in a broad range of disruptive technologies, green technologies, from cellulosic biofuels to better batteries and disruptive solar panels and coal gasification and many, many others. And you probably noticed I'm out there making a lot of noise about these initiatives. Why is it? Honestly, I believe it's crucial that the rest of the industry invest more. In 2005, the venture capital industry total invested $600 million in green technologies. Last year, it doubled to $1.2 billion. But here's the point. We need much, much more. We need R&D and investment that is scaled with the size of this problem and the size of the opportunity. For reference, Exxon's revenues in 2005 were $1 billion a day. And do you know they only spent 0.2% of sales on R&D? 0.2%. Second fact, the president's new budget for renewable energy for an entire year, R&D, is less than $1 billion. That's less than Exxon takes in revenue per day. And the third fact, I bet you didn't know there's enough hot rock under the surface of the United States to provide all the energy we would need for 1,000 years. It's called geothermal. And you know what the budget proposal was that was submitted for geothermal research? A measly $20 million. I'd suggest to you it's almost criminal that we're not investing more. It is criminal in green technologies, and it's why efforts like Stanford has, Berkeley has, and others are so important and still, in my opinion, underfunded. So in a year's worth of learning, here's what we found out. Really a lot of surprises. I was surprised to find a mass retailer who believed going green was going to be really profitable. Or who would have thought that a database entrepreneur would move the entire legislature in California, transforming the state? Who would have thought that a developing nation in South America would become the biofuel capital of the world? And who would have thought that engineers and scientists trying to make a better drug would set on a course to make better biofuels? And most importantly, who would have thought that all of this is not enough? Okay, then what is enough? What it's going to take to stabilize the climate? What's it going to take to keep the ice in Greenland from crashing into the ocean? Well, the science tells us that, they're guessing, we've got to drastically reduce CO2 emissions to perhaps half of the current levels, even while the worldwide economy grows. And I'll say maybe, I hope we have the political will to chart that kind of a trajectory here in the United States. But we've only got one atmosphere, so we've got to get a responsible trajectory for the world. And one of the wild cards here is China. The United States today emits about 5.8 gigatons of CO2 per year. China's about 3.3. If we stay on a course of business as usual, China will be emitting by 2050 23 gigatons a year. That's as much as the rest of the world total emits today. If we proceed with business as usual, we're going to go out of business. Now, just to drill deeper on this, when I was in Davos, part of our learning earlier this year, China's mayor of Dalian was asked about China's CO2 strategy, and let me paraphrase his answer. He said, the United States generates 7 times the CO2 per citizen that we do in China. Why should China sacrifice our growth so that the West can continue to be profligate and stupid? That's what he said. And nobody had a good answer for him. The only answer I can imagine is one that's economic, so that all the people in all the nations do the right thing. We've got to use policy and harness innovation so we can make the right outcome, the profitable outcome, and therefore the likely outcome. And that means, as Walmart says, that going green has really got to mean making green, making money, saving money. Remember, energy is a $6 trillion business worldwide. This thing is the mother of all markets. I mean, you remember that internet thing? Yeah, well, it's still growing and it's a big deal, but going green, I think, is going to be bigger than the internet. And in fact, it could be the largest economic opportunity of the 21st century. And moreover, if we succeed at this, going green will be considered. Going green will be, I think, the largest transformation that we've had on the planet. As Bill Joy reminds me, since the planet went anaerobic, that is from, methane to oxygen, aerobic, from methane to oxygen in our atmosphere. I said, thanks, Bill. One more important point. I'm pretty sure that we're fast running out of time. Nobody knows what exactly the tipping point is, but greenhouse gases circulate in the atmosphere for thousands of years before fully absorbed. There's still greenhouse gases up there from Henry Ford's original Model T. And so this problem is building and building. It's the integral of what's been done until now. We've got to plan to overachieve on this, because if we got to cut all emissions in half, that means we can't count on everybody doing their part. Some of us are going to have to do more. The cost of delay here is really enormous. I don't see how we can afford to come up short, because the risk is really a runaway. It's like the people who start to save for their retirement in the last 5 years of their life. They're not going to make it. So the hard question really is, if the trajectory of today's companies, individuals, policies, and innovations is not enough, what are we going to do? What are you going to do about your nephews or nieces? What are you going to do about the kids you may have someday? And I don't know. I really don't. I believe in the power of entrepreneurs. I think they do more than anyone thinks possible with less than anyone thinks possible. And I also, as you can tell, believe in the power of networks, the kind of networks you're poised to build, to continue and sustain, because you're in this very special place. And I think everybody here cares a great deal about this change. So what's the call to action? You know, a lot of people have said, well, we need a Manhattan Project or a mission like Apollo to put a man on the moon. And I think that severely understates the magnitude of this problem. Both of those were really great projects. But to get the planet, to get those institutions to move, we're going to have to reindustrialize the planet. We're going to have to change the behavior of most of, if not all, of the individuals. So what's the individual call to action for you? Those of you who have this passion, I think you should think very seriously about having your next gig be going green in whichever way you choose to do it. You get involved in the policy process as an individual. You know, write to congressmen, advocate, go lobby to make sure that one of the 6 bills in the current Congress for mandatory cap and trade on greenhouse gases gets to the president's desk, and then push on him to sign it. Use your personal set of networks and Rolodex to think outside the box. What would it mean if this school really went green? What would it mean, not just the buildings, but all the lives of everybody here? What would it mean if you moved Stanford to go green? Stanford's the largest employer in Silicon Valley. What would it mean if where you went next to take your talents and your influence was an out-of-the-box green thing? What would it mean for Amazon to go green, or Apple, or Google? I don't know. But I know that while I'm scared, generally a kind of glass overflowing guy, not just half full, but overflowing kind of guy, and I'm pessimistic about the way this is going to turn out, I'm hopeful. You know, we can't help but try to work together as large and as powerfully as we can as a group so that our creativity and our influence gets multiplied. And if we do that, I am, as I said, hopeful that I can have a different conversation with my daughter Mary 20 years from now. That's green. That's why over half the professionals at Kleiner are very engaged to work on Greentech, in addition to the internet. No, it's not over. Medical technologies and a project we have in pandemic. So I'd like to turn now, if I can, to just a couple of thoughts about Kleiner Perkins, but most importantly about what makes for great ventures. And then, as I suggested, this unsolicited career advice. You know, Kleiner is viewed as, and I don't think we'll ever shake this, as a good, quite good venture capital firm. Collectively, we've decided to try and describe ourselves as an RC firm. That is, as a relationship capital firm, because everybody's got the same money. And I think it's the relationships, the networks that you and we can bring to new ventures that make the most difference. So, yeah, we're a team of 22 partners, and we've had, as Dean said, pretty good value creation over the last 33 years that we've been there. But the most important thing about the partnership I'm part of are, in fact, the partners. And they are just remarkable. They're technically strong. They've got operating experience on board. There's 3 generations of these partners in our firm at any given time. That's how Tom and Eugene built the partnership. And a number of us get a lot of publicity like I do, but I have to tell you, a venture as successful as Google, that's not a John Doerr project. That's a John Denniston, Juliet Flint, Bill Joy initiative. And we all really gang tackle an opportunity to try to provide services to entrepreneurs. And when we see a venture with the right key success factor, if I can move from venture capitalists to ventures, we try to assist them like crazy. I really think venture capitalists ought not be center stage. Our place is off to the side of the stage, kind of behind the curtains and pulling them open for the various acts in the performance. The best ventures have these key success factors. They absolutely have A-plus passionate founders. They're committed to technical and market excellence. They're serving large, fast-growing markets. They have a reasonable approach to their financings. They have a sense of urgency. But most of all, for our sensibilities, They are missionaries, not mercenaries. What do I mean by that? It's really important, and I was tuned into this by my partner, Randy Komisar, who's written a book about parts of this. And you can sense this when you're interviewing to work in a company or a venture. The difference between being a mercenary and a missionary is all the difference in the world. And while the world's not quite to these two extremes, on one hand, the mercenaries, they have enormous drive. They're opportunistic. Like Andy Grove, they believe only the paranoid survive. They're really sprinting for the short run. But that's quite different, I suggest to you, than the missionaries, who have passion, not paranoia, who are strategic, not opportunistic, and they're focused on the big idea and partnerships. It's the difference between focusing on the competition or the customer. It's a difference between worshiping at the altar of founders or having a meritocracy where you get all the ideas on the table and the best ones win. It's a difference between being exclusively interested in the financial statements or also in the mission statements. It's a difference between being a loner on your own or being part of a team, having an attitude of entitlement versus contribution, or, as Randy puts it, living a deferred life plan versus a whole life that at any given moment is trying to work. The difference between just making money. Anybody who tells you they don't want to make money is lying. Or making money and making meaning also. Or my bottom line is it's the difference between success or success and significance. You can choose. And to be sure, early in my career, I was focused on career, intel, growth, making money. The balance will shift over time. But it's so much easier to be passionate about trying to solve a problem in consultative selling as opposed to flogging some new breakfast cereal, with deep respect for the people who are become brand experts working on packaged goods. You get the right values and a team that's energized and committed to their work, and remarkable things happen. And we've seen that across an array of remarkable ventures. There's a lot of logos up here. I don't propose to dwell on any of them except to see that they're successful. And then try and be thematic. What are the themes that flow through these great companies that can be and are being built? Well, we've organized our partnership in a kind of semi-strategic way around initiatives. And that's when several of us, like a team, get together to focus on something. And historically, they've been the bits and bytes and the bugs and drugs and the information tech and the life science tech. But recently, we've added Greentech, which I suggested is all about coals, car, and conservation. And then an important effort I won't talk about called pandemic preparedness, which in my alliteration is really a threat that I think could very well be fast and fatal, and for which we're woefully unprepared. But I want to move from tech ventures, if I can, to a story right from here, from the business school, about social ventures and social entrepreneurs. Because a remarkable thing happened about 6 years ago. Kim Smith, a GSB student, raised her hand, somehow sought me out. We found each other and said, I want to do a 380 to deal with the large, enormous, intractable problem of the deterioration of public education in America. Public education. That's the largest, most screwed up part of the American economy. And, of course, like a carpenter with a hammer, for a venture capitalist, every solution is a venture capital fund. And Kim proposed and put together, founded something called the New Schools Venture Fund, which was the idea that we could seek out education entrepreneurs. Someone asked what they are. Those are those hybrid combinations of leaders who can scale organizations, maybe from business, and educators who know how to work their way around the system, that we could find those, support those, help them write business plans so that they can build scalable, innovative new schools. Because all the action in education is at the school and with the teachers. They found that a recipe called charter public schools is really sustainable and scalable. Anyone I suggest can make a single school great. The real question is, how can you make a network of a couple dozen schools or 100 schools great? Because we got 80,000 schools in this country, and at least 20, some people say 30% of them are crummy. They're killing the kids. The kids that only get to those schools have a permanent cap on their lifetime. In California, we even plan where we're going to put our state prisons around where those crummy schools are. That's not the America I was raised in. So what they've done with about $70 million is back more than a couple dozen education entrepreneurs in their ventures who have founded and are running today over 100 new innovative charter public schools. There's some in East Palo Alto. There's one in San Jose. There's others in Oakland. And that group is on track, without adding any more to it, to add another 400 charter public schools, total 500 5 years from now. A couple hundred kids in a school, that's 1 million kids every year. But the genius in this, like with Walmart, is not so much these schools, because I'm still only talking about 500 out of 80,000. But when you put 4 or 5 of these in Oakland, California, they put enormous pressure on the other regular crummy public schools. We've got to get better, or the students leave there to get this competition idea, right, within the public education system. This is really good work, hard work. Takes a long time commitment. And I have to tell you, I'm so proud to be associated with a GSB alum who said that she and others were going to devote their life to this kind of work in addition to advising entrepreneurs in the commercial sector. That there's power in these social entrepreneurs who can do more than anyone thinks possible with less than anyone thinks possible. 2 more examples I'm just going to touch on because I can tell we're running short of time. This guy Bono, you may think of him as a rock star. Wrong. His passion is desperate illness in Africa, what he calls stupid poverty, these people who can't get anti-malarial drugs. And so the first thing he did with an organization called Data is he ran around the world. And I think he got $40 billion worth of unproductive third world debt forgiven. It was just seeping away dollars and obligations from economies, desperately poor economies, that are now being applied to education and to healthcare. And then for his next gig, about a year ago, he launched this RED campaign, right, that allow average Americans everywhere who care about this but don't know what to do to buy a Gap T-shirt or a red iPod or a red Motorola phone and have half the profits of that go into the Global Fund on a recurring basis with a 5-year commitment because they can lower their marketing costs. It's co-branded, right? That red brand begins to stand for something. Now, we'll see over time how this story turns out, but he's the real thing, as is certainly Muhammad Yunus, who got the Nobel Peace Prize. He was here at Stanford about a year ago. And his idea is that everybody has the right to capital. It's a basic human right. And the idea that banks only lend money to people who don't need it, particularly in the developing world, is stupid when if you loan $50 to a woman responsible for a family of 4, with that, she'll buy a loom or start a business, repay the money with 98% probability within a year, and start marching that family out of the abject poverty that any of us could be in here. 1 odd out of 3, 1 chance out of 3, 2 billion people, less than $1 a day. Or as Bono says, kind of where you live should not decide whether you live or whether you die. Why are these up here? Because venture capitalists and Kleiner Partners have found a way to help them in their mission. Again, supporting entrepreneurs who really have something that can scale. I want to close with some advice for you. You certainly don't have to take notes on it. You don't even have to follow any of it. But this is the real reason I'm here today. And it's to suggest that you take your first assignment based on your opportunity to learn and grow there, not based on compensation. I was really lucky to get hired at Intel and grew and learned a lot. Build a strong foundation of operating skills. Carry a bag. That means go sell. Launch a product. Manage a dozen or more people. Learn about really great management processes from the best companies, from the Amazons, from the GEs, from the Googles. And then, generally my advice is swing for the fences when your time is right, because talented, experienced leaders are going to always be in very great demand. Now, if you're Jerry Yang or you've got a deal with Larry and Sergey I want to see you at the end of this conversation. I don't want to say the only thing to do is go great into a large company, but I think that's a smart thing to do so you can make some mistakes and learn on other people's money. I do think you're going to be judged on your ability to listen and think critically and above all communicate. What I've seen is people's ability to move groups, legitimately so, is based on their ability to convey ideas and sign them up for the new mission. So you want to develop, as Andy Grove insisted at Intel, the art of confronting a person, not the person, but the problem. So you can confront the problem without confronting the person. It's not that my partner Wen Xie is a jerk. It's that it's something about his performance. And so that And neither of those, I hasten to add, is true. So don't forgo the opportunity to learn all these basic skills that Dean Joss alluded to, I think, when he pointed out the good fortune that I've had in my career. And there are always, always, always in life extra points for humor. Here's my self-assessment of, I think that's where I want to go next. Is that right? No? I've got some more unsolicited advice for you. Let's do this quickly. Always network. Go develop and sustain personal, lifelong networks. When I was interviewing for jobs, I kept the business cards of everybody I met with. I stayed in touch with them for years and years and years. I interviewed as many places as I could. I spent time at Hewlett-Packard, time at Tandem, time at Intel. I learned about the cultures of these places. I interviewed at Bain. They wouldn't hire me. I interviewed at BCG. They wouldn't hire me. I interviewed at Southwestern Bell Telephone and got an offer and decided not to go there. But this is a tremendous time in your life to go check out what that world's like. Seek mentors. Seek these people who will spend time with you occasionally because they believe in you and want to help you grow in the way that somebody helped them. Network with somebody. Just resolve every day you're going to network with somebody to learn about them and how you and they can perhaps work together. And once a week for sure, call your mom. I think it's good to seek positions that have got a lot of external contact and relations, to take risks, and to remember always that integrity is a binary state. Either you have it or you don't. And if you ever spread your fingers apart and let the sand of daily life flow through them, I don't think you can ever get it back. So this journey you're on, it's long. It's a marathon. But you certainly want to live in this moment. Be present for others. I'm working on trying to make better eye contact, to really be there, to be present for my daughter. We've declared an email-free zone in our house, which is from 6 p.m. until 9 p.m. But you'll have time for you'll have time, I'm sure, in your life for those priorities. We turn to, in the end, some really clear questioning about what are your priorities. How are you going to make meaning? How do you want to achieve success? And then someday, how are you going to measure that success? And so I thought I'd give myself a self-graded report card here. On the education front, I got a high pass at Rice for engineering. And then I didn't get into my first choice of business schools. But I'm really honored to be here. And I built a career at Burger Chef. That was very unsatisfactory. and then worked at Intel. That was a big win. And then joined Kleiner, and it's looking good so far. But I've taken my life and said, I'm going to be really Nazi-like in prioritizing my time. So it's family first, and then my partner second, and then the ventures to which I've committed third, and then always time for the new ventures fourth, and then some time carved out, really measured, 15% of my time, no more, seldom less, for a kind of community service or giving back. The other thing I measure is how many nights a month I get home for dinner by 6:30. But I'm in trouble and the team's in trouble if I'm not home 20 nights a month. That's the goal, while you've got kids that are depending on you. The other thing that moves me is books, really great books. And so I have a couple to recommend to you. And a way for you to get a copy of these slides. Some of my favorites are this one I alluded to. It's a Harvard Business School book called The Monk and the Riddle by Randy Komisar, really about meaning. There's a great book called Banker to the Poor by Muhammad Yunus. And then, of course, there's Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. For a story that you might think is fiction, after one of my famous failures called Go, the entrepreneur Jerry Kaplan wrote a book called Startup. It's still available. I think he should have called it Screw Up, is what I told him. But it conveys a lot of the intensity and franticness that can be in a startup venture when you get there. So I'd suggest to you, if you're interested in joining a startup or a venture-backed large company like a Google or an Amazon, or if you have an idea for something you want to pursue, a new business or an independent 380, I encourage you to write to me. My email address is up there. And in fact, if you were to send me a mail with your 3 favorite books, the one that changed your lives, I'll send you a copy of these slides and 3 more that I enjoy. I get to learn about a lot of great books that way. So the bottom line of this is to encourage you to have your next gig have something to do with going green. That won't be the honest voice for each of us. But I hope we can marshal a lot more work and effort and energy on that problem that I think is large. And so I'd like to close now by making sure we've covered these questions, throw a few more up on the board, and then we'll be done. We talked about education entrepreneurs and what they're like. They're really no different than tech entrepreneurs, except they've got some measure of experience and really deep passion about improving public education or education generally. The question here was about healthcare costs and the role for technology, which I consider to be deep and significant. Healthcare is the second largest, most screwed up part of our economy. It's the only system that I know of where the payers, the providers, and the beneficiaries, that's the patients, are not connected in any kind of a linked, rational system. And in fact, I like to say that Americans just want the best health care that other people's money will buy. And this deeply lessens our competitiveness. You see it in the automobile industry. So I'm involved in a project and looking for projects that will align the incentives for the first time from a plan with the payers and the patients and infuse in that kind of web cloud-based technology so that what it really is, it's a decision-making business, gets the right information, all of the historical and the current data at the fingertips of physicians who I think need to be more empowered today. Let's see. This is about the internet. Anybody remember what that question was? Okay, perhaps you'll ask it again. Online news. I don't know a lot about online news. I think I've spoken enough about venture capital and going green. Great opportunities in biofuels, great opportunities in technology to clean up coal. The hardest and most important, I think, are opportunities in conservation, in changing human behavior. I'm very excited about the work we can and should do there. And on the international front, some have said that, well, Kleiner kind of looks like the whole place is going green and nobody's leaving Sand Hill Road. Other venture capitalists are, doing franchises and opening storefronts in China and in India. I, in fact, think it's really important we do. This is a flat world. There'll be increasing amounts of innovation in China and India. And by the way, for green, also in Europe. And so I think you can look for us to make some announcements, and we've actually done them, some really major commitments. 3 weekends ago, I went to China for a day. And, fly there, fly back, more time in the air than on the ground. It is just a plane flight away, but it's a very, very different business environment. And I think if you have the aspiration, which my partners and I do, to try to take this torch of Kleiner Perkins Caulfield and Byers, understand we're custodians of it, and we want to pass it along for the benefit of entrepreneurs and other partners over a long period of time, you say, let's take a really long strategic view. What will it mean to be the best supporter of entrepreneurs in China a decade from now? And then I think you do a lot of different things other than renting your name out to a group of entrepreneurs that you've found. So that's the view we take. I don't know if we're going to succeed, but this is a good question, and we're very ambitious and committed to try to do well there. You may note that, when a third of my partners now are Asian, and almost that many are fluent in Mandarin. And compared to Kleiner of 10 years ago, a third of our partners are female. And I'll tell you, it makes working with entrepreneurs and working as a team a much more diverse, much better point of view. We're more effective. When somebody's coming in with an internet proposal that's a consumer internet proposal about serving women who have most of the purchasing power on the internet, I wouldn't want to compete with the partners at Kleiner Perkins if I'm a bunch of, 30 to 50-year-old white males someplace up on Sand Hill Road, because we don't get it. Okay, we got time for some more questions or topics. Yes, ma'am, your name.
My name's Emma, and my question is, how do you best communicate to somebody else who doesn't really get the green thing to get them interested in this? Do you just continue to tell the story about your daughter, or do you tell them they can make money, or What's your bar concern?
It depends on different audiences, so I'm going to put it up here and come back to it, if that's all right. Let's try to get a half dozen questions on the board. Okay? Name?
My name is Vishal. I think a lot of what we focus in the presentation is on the supply side of green technology.
Yeah.
What about the demand side, where you can price environmentally damaging fuels such that green technology becomes naturally viable? Because today the price of these fuels do not take into account the damage they do to the environment, so-called externalities.
That's a big lever, and we talked about that a little. I want to come back to it. Another question or topic?
Andrew is my name. Any thought of drafting Al Gore for 08?
Al Gore for 08. Who would vote for Al Gore in 2008? Doesn't look like he'd win here. Yeah. Well, it depends. It's plurality, right? Not majority.
My name is Ed. Can you talk a little bit about how business or venture capital can be used to address the environment of terrorism and
Venture capital and terror. I thought the venture capitalists were the terrorists. Terrorism. No, that's a really good question, and the work on pandemic is there. Yes, your name?
Corey, you talked about for-profit conservation. Is there any space there?
For-profit conservation. So this is back in green. I should make a whole green column. So we're going to move that over there. Dollars from conservation. You want to get two more up here in the remaining minutes? Yes. Yeah, that's you.
Jules,
hey, Jules,
can you talk about just how you get LPs excited about green technology and how you show them that from return potential it's an exciting opportunity?
LPs and green return. Very timely question. Okay, that's it for questions, because I know we have a hard stop here. So the LPs on green returns is actually quite easy. The most successful, I think, 3 IPOs in China last year were solar companies, and the markets are very large. We've had no problems convincing limited partners they ought to invest in this, form special funds, and so forth. As for the fuel prices and getting in the economics, that there's a cost to dumping these hydrocarbons into the atmospheric sewer. The answer here, I believe, is mandatory programs of cap and trade that builds carbon into those. There are other advocates who say we ought to add a very direct carbon tax, which we could also, in transition to where we need to end, which is where, in fact, these green renewable fuels are cheaper. If you put in place a mandatory cap and trade, you've basically said there's now a parallel accounting system. And part of the cost are the costs we measure with today's accounting, and the other costs are going to be the carbon costs. I was asked about, what's that question there? Can't even read my... How do you communicate about green? It really depends on the audience. If you're with scientists, it's a different story than the one that I told you about my daughter Mary, though the personal connection, telling stories is key. If you're with policymakers, actually those stories work really well. If you're with entrepreneurs, and I did this recently at a great company called Bloom Technology, you've got to be incredibly goal-oriented and task-oriented and specific about how their innovation can really change the rules of the game. But mostly in the noise that we're making, not noise, the message we're taking to the market, I'm trying to move investors. I'd like to see the venture capital community double its dollars next year. I'd like to have legislators believe that mandatory cap and trade is good for American jobs. How Red China goes green, whether or not we get our green automobiles from Europe, China, or Detroit, bears enormously on the quality of life that you're going to have and our kids are going to have. I'll table, if I may, the question of terrorism and venture capital. I don't want to try to be glib about that. And I think on that point, we've probably covered most of or many of your questions. I'd really like to thank you for the time to be here. I'd like to come every couple of years, and I'll be around for a few minutes if you want to talk.